On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Chris Morgan. He is the VP of Data Science at Lincoln Financial Group. We're going to be talking about data culture. And, there's a lot of stuff that's happening right now with Gen AI, a lot of emerging trends. How do you take advantage of that? How do you make sure that your organization is in the right position from a culture perspective? But also, we're going to talk about some of the tech debt on the data side that your company has taken on, and that actually might be coming from a cultural perspective. And we're also going to be talking about stakeholder expectations on some of these things and aligning them and making sure that we're set up for the future. Chris, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Before we start, Lincoln Financial Group, tell us what you do over there.
Yeah, so at Lincoln Financial, I lead a team of talented data scientists and machine learning engineers, and we sit in our retail solutions pillar, which focuses on pricing and building, or as we like to say, manufacturing our life and annuities products. Lincoln itself, we take our name from President Lincoln. We're very proud of that and continue to be guided by his ideals. Since 1905, we provided financial protection and security to our customers and their families.
Awesome. All right. I'm sure people have heard of Lincoln. It's a pretty big company. So we're talking within the context of data generally here, though, and data culture. I think data culture has come to the forefront. There's other parts of data that we're hearing about: governance, quality, a lot of the pieces that previously data people love talking about, but no one else really did. I guess when we talk about data culture, maybe you could just help define what that means to you. So just as a context point.
When I think of data culture, I think of wanting to learn, right? It's beyond just analyzing data. It's how can we build processes that are repeatable and maintainable going forward so that we can extract the most value out of our data, and really an understanding to what goes into that. And I think at times there is an opportunity for education to increase our data literacy and to raise the analytical watermark. And so I view a big part of my role as really just evangelizing data and the importance of it, and how can we extract value out of it moving forward, and what is our North Star, right? What are we continually striving towards, and how is data going to enable that?
Absolutely. I think that foundation, that understanding of the role data plays, I think everyone knows they need reports, and I think that's the part where the end user potentially cares about. I think the stuff that you and I are talking about is all the stuff that goes in between idea to delivery and making sure that they're aware. When you're talking about foundational components and you're talking about data culture, that's an interesting balance, because the end user typically really doesn't care about your foundation. That's not the problem. They don't care. They need the report. But also, as a data culture, potentially, the more, like you mentioned, the more that they're aware, the more that they're actually empowered to understand and be champions for data, it might help in terms of your partnership. I guess that component of that foundational data layer and your stakeholders and their understanding of the importance to the organization, that's tricky. Can you maybe just talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to use a lot of analogies and storytelling, as I'm sure others have said in the past. I often will challenge myself not to use the word data when I go into some of these conversations. And an analogy I've been using a lot lately is related to a grocery store, and say we need to go get dinner for tonight. And, we want to be able to ask some virtual assistant, what grocery store can I go to make a Cobb salad, and ensure that all the ingredients are there. But in order for that to work, we first need to ensure that every grocery store in our neighborhood has the same ingredient list for a Cobb salad, and that we're all defining fresh romaine lettuce the same way. And until we can do that, we're not able to build on top of it. So I'm trying to use stories to say the importance, really drive to the why and the motivation. Or another way, potentially, we want to bring in a cool new tool. How are we going to measure adoption? How are we going to show that a customer engaging with that tool leads to a deflection in call volume or an increase in customer experience? And until we have the foundational data in place to be able to measure that, it's very difficult to go make additional investments.
I love that example, by the way. I love it. My daughter actually is like that. There's just too many examples. And I like that example because it's something, and you mentioned Cobb salad, and we can actually use this as our working scenario. Cobb salad it doesn't really have as many moving parts as something more intricate. But yet, what you described was a common understanding, having some semantic meaning around lettuce and what romaine lettuce is. And, if they don't have fresh lettuce, what does that mean? When you're looking at data culture and you're looking at an organization, and we can kind of, jump to the org again, is if somebody's looking to take advantage of all the emerging trends out there, some of this foundational stuff that might have been not as tight before needs to start falling into place. How do you start affecting that culture side? I guess your example is great. I get the example, but getting someone to actually go through and play their part and go, you know what, Chris is right. I need to add whatever metadata to these fields, to these terms, so that for me, I can take advantage of these tools. Because really, it's you helping them take advantage of tools that help them.
Absolutely. I think it's always important to start small and begin with the end in mind. So meeting our stakeholders where they are, understanding their challenges, understanding what potential gaps exist to meet those challenges, and finding stakeholders, especially as you're beginning your journey, who are willing to really buy in and invest, and not necessarily financially, but with their time, and someone who is curious to learn more about how data works, right? I would always rather work with the person who is more nascent in their data journey, but excited to learn more, than someone who just doesn't care or is saying, no, you go do it, you handle it, et cetera, and not willing to come along in the journey. So I think finding that right partner, especially as you're starting, especially as you're potentially trying to influence the data culture in your organization, that's something I found really successful in my career is again, to find that business partner, hopefully someone who is more senior, that's really willing to invest in the data team, the data space.
I've had a lot of cybersecurity professionals on, and a lot of times they need that champion because there's so many end user process touch points that impact their policies, that impact what their governance is. That champion is very important, and I think what I'm hearing is on the data side. Not that I don't think is equal to what cybersecurity people are doing, but I think on the data side, we're starting to look past people needing to do their work, and this data goes into a system. And now we're saying, we need you to follow some rules while you're doing your work, because if you want to take advantage of a more powerful future, following those quote unquote data rules, we won't call them data rules to them, but between us, those data rules, those governance policy, whatever they are, is going to be imperative if you want to later take advantage. Because up to now, my counter to this is, and I find this fascinating, is we've seen data science, advanced analytics, BI, reporting, big data, all these things. And I haven't heard as much conversation around governance, quality, and data culture as I have in the last 18 to 24 months since Gen AI surfaced.
I think what that's stemming from potentially is needing to know what's going into these systems to stay compliant with a changing regulatory environment. I truly believe that these generative models are going to become a commodity, and what's going to separate them is who can take more advantage of the most advantage of their proprietary data. And to be able to do that and know what's going into these systems, you have to have strong governance, strong processes, security, compliance, et cetera, to know what's going into the system, to be able to efficiently scale and keep up with that changing regulatory environment, whether it's the right to be forgotten, the need to obfuscate data. And so having those guardrails in place, those processes built out, hopefully from some centralized function that sets standards that then can be embedded in a federated model and be close to your business partners for that domain expertise. That's really how I envision that working successfully and being able to scale. And that centralized function, certainly I think still needs to engage with, potentially you've got data stewards or a data governance function within different pillars, different verticals in your organization. but that they would still have some representation, at that centralized table, if you will, to be involved in that decision-making process, and then take that away to their respective units. You just having everything centralized, I don't think that's a method for scaling. And on the opposite end, having everything federated and doing everything differently in your own way, that also is not a method for scaling. So some combination of the two is needed.
As you're looking at the technical debt on the data side, obviously, scope and size and amount, that can be a separate discussion. But as you're looking at emerging trends and you're looking at areas of opportunity, and obviously you're looking at some previous decisions made. Okay, well, I can see why they made these decisions at the time. It made sense, but now they didn't obviously foresee these advanced. I get all this, but as you're kind of looking at, hey, I'd like my company to take advantage of this. You're the VP of data science. When you look at tech debt and the balance of maybe having to address that and the areas of opportunity that you're looking to potentially take advantage of on some of these emerging technologies, how do you balance where you look in that tech debt side?
Well, to start, I love how you frame that question up and talk about understanding where we've come from. And that's something that I've had to learn the hard way in my career, is to really understand, hey, at some point in time, this decision was made with good intentions. So let's go back and really understand where we were historically as a company, as a team, and why that decision was made. And that's a really important place to start. And from there, prioritizing what is critical, right? If there's a process that is no longer being used, et cetera, then probably don't need to pay down the tech debt there. So understanding what is going to either drive the most business value or what's highly critical with the least complexity. And then from there, making incremental improvements. So if you're working in a sprint function, or if you've got your work assigned for the next month, can you set aside 20% or what have you of your time to pay down that technical debt? So there's an agreement that we are making progress, but it's not going to be overnight. And then finally, getting that stakeholder buy-in to understand why it's important, communicating the benefits of that, right? The toothpick and duct tape analogy, right? Like, yes, right now it works, but it's held together with toothpicks and duct tape, and there is a cost to that anytime something goes wrong, or debugging, maintaining, ongoing support, et cetera. So you can tell your stakeholders, why it's important, and bringing them along for that journey as well. Because to the end user, if everything goes right, when you pay down that tech debt, nothing's going to change. So what's the value of that? And ensuring you have alignment so that you can focus 20 or 25% of your time on paying down that tech debt.
I guess you've worked at some larger companies, and obviously they have lots of data, been around for a while. You collect a lot more data. That both, I guess, now that we're looking at some of these advanced technologies, Gen AI, that's obviously in some ways a benefit, because obviously lots of data is good. Also, you have lots of data that might not be ready to move into an advanced solution. When you're looking at just the future, and you're trying to envision delivering solutions and that balance, and obviously going back to data culture and talking about some of those aspects of having the champion, having to understand the benefits, how do you balance the tech debt that you have seen, the data culture, and the amount of time that may be worth actually investing in that, versus going, what, for this project, we might just start at this time point because it's just too expensive for us to go back and correct, 20 years of data?
It's a very difficult question to answer, besides saying, the blanket, it depends, right? And I think,
of course,
you started by talking about the collecting of data, and especially in the insurance industry and selling annuities products that last an entire lifetime. We have policies on our books that are decades old. Certainly a startup is going to have an advantage in the sense that they don't have any of that. They start with zero technical debt, right? And they're probably going to start in the cloud. And even most companies, data rolls off their books, so to speak, and they can do a system migration to the cloud. But we are in an industry where those policies don't roll off our books. They have been on our books for decades, and they will continue to be on our books for decades. So first, just recognizing that in the industry and trying to maintain that perspective is something that I've really challenged myself to do, especially since joining Lincoln. To your point about prioritizing that, then, right? Really working closely with your business partners to understand what their priorities are, and as so many others have said, how does your company make money? And how can you help your company make money or save money? So looking to the future, what products are we going to invest in the future? Okay, is that a product line or is that book of business something that we could benefit more from if we move it to a more modern platform, as opposed to products that we're stepping away from and are still an on-prem system? Okay, maybe that's not a product that we need to really focus or invest in right now. And then looking to the future, and coming back to an earlier question you made about emerging technologies and taking advantage of that, right? Say, for example, we have some data process right now with SQL stored procedures, and we want to make that more modern, maybe with Python APIs, right, or some other streaming data connection. Can we take advantage of some of these large language models and some of this emerging technology to help convert that code for us, right? Even if it's just writing pseudocode or gathering documentation, anything like that. That is one area that I'm really excited to explore more about, and something that I certainly see a lot of potential in for some of these migrations going forward.
Yeah, it's interesting because your business, obviously at Lincoln, is very different than many other companies in some ways, and you do have some constraints. When you're looking at your stakeholders who are maybe hearing in the industry about the growth of Gen AI and hearing about, well, I mean, just the chatter about it, I think you can literally not avoid the conversation. It's everywhere, and they might be using ChatGPT, in their personal life, or it's somewhere in their home life. So it's there. When you're looking at that and you're looking at, how to bring those type of capabilities into a company, right? And you mentioned obviously data cultures to make them aware about how important this is to help them and make their jobs better, make their lives better. When you're looking at that, and obviously they kind of might look at something like a ChatGPT or similar tool or Gemini and be like, hey, you know what? It's right there. Like I see it. I can use it, touch it, feel it. But we're going to tell them, there might be 6 months, it might be a year, it might be some amount of time until we can maybe leverage it. How do you have that conversation? Because obviously that one's a little tricky.
To say the least. Absolutely. Managing expectations is a huge part of the role, and something that I certainly feel like I do on a day in and day out basis. I think it starts with education and training and increasing data literacy, because yes, I would say most of our business partners will interact with as data people. Their understanding of Gen AI or chatbots is what they see on the evening news. And so when ChatGPT really took the world by storm, right, and it was November 22, last year, spent a lot of time on just demystifying generative AI and put together kind of a roadshow, if you will, and was able to share and present on that to a variety of different teams in the organization. From there, defining success. What's our why? Why do we want to invest in generative AI? Beyond efficiency or optimization, you can use basic ML, you can use RPA, right, to become more efficient. So what's our North Star? What's our why? And from there, overly communicate what's going on. Not only clearly communicate, but overly communicate. I think there's some Gladwell quotes out there about needing to say something over many times before it's understood. And really until you think that you're a broken record and you hear people repeating your mantra, overly communicate what you're doing and how you're moving forward and showing progress.
Yeah, I've been trying to think back to the technology trends and the impact on the enterprise. I don't know. Anybody really just was like, "Oh, the metaverse, it's coming," and how's it going to affect me? I don't think crypto or blockchain. I think we could go back to when Facebook really took off, when Meta really took off, and at some point, organizations were trying to think, how do we bring that type of look and feel to the enterprise to kind of make people more comfortable in terms of adoption? That didn't even really hold that long. So I don't know. I keep going back and I'm like, when's the last time we have end users that are learning about the art of the possible while also, executives on the technology side are also learning about the art of the possible at the same time? And I think that's kind of an interesting dynamic that I don't know we've seen previously, really.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what can we do to find safe, small ways where we can start to put these hands into the tools of our employees to get them more comfortable with it, right? Or to create more experimentation environments in the cloud with synthetic data, if you will, to get our technology teams more comfortable with these tools and how to interact with various large language models in a secure way that still meets our obligations of privacy, legal, ethics, et cetera, that we owe our consumers. And I completely agree with you. There's such a need and excitement around wanting to learn more about this technology. And so what can we do to give our employee base that opportunity, again, in a safe and controlled way with guardrails that they can start experimenting with it and learning more about it and getting more comfortable with it?
I go back to data culture. I guess in this scenario where in the last 24 months, 18 months, people have really been hearing about Gen AI and it's been, to a large part, brought to the forefront. People are interacting with it on a daily basis. Is that going to help you with data culture? Because I mean, I guess the bigger question is this a case where the end user is seeing a preview of where their future could lie, where the future could go? Is that going to help you with data culture and going back to, addressing some of those foundational data layers that you do need their buy-in and their help with?
I think yes and no. Yes, in the sense of there's an excitement here and an interest here and an interest in the data profession that maybe we hadn't seen previously. And so if we say it selfishly, to be the center of attention almost, right, when it comes to data science and AI, like that's really cool. That's really exciting. But on the flip side, again, a lot of misinformation. And so what can we do to manage those expectations, to show that phased approach, if you will? And I've been told before, can't you just point the AI at it, right? And so again, that opportunity for educating and increasing our data culture around, hey, how do these systems really work? Let's pull back under the hood. In Eric Siegel's book, The AI Playbook, if I can make a plug, fantastic read. He makes a great analogy about driving a car and saying, you don't need to be a master mechanic to drive a car, but hey, you do need to know the rules of the road, right? To use a blinker, to stop at a stop sign. And you need to know how fast can you take that turn and when to apply the brakes. And so I view it very similarly with machine learning systems, data science applications, this technology, right? Let's bring our business partners along for the ride, show them under the hood just a little bit so they can get more comfortable with it and really start with the end in mind.
I love that. Yeah, it definitely have to put a link to the book in. And I think that's a great analogy. I love your examples thus far. They're very visually clear, and I can kind of look out and see it. I guess final question, just because I think you mentioned something there, and I've been thinking about it through the conversation and listening to you. It's an interesting point in which data does have some of that light on it. It has a lot of visibility. It has a lot of moving parts. You went on a roadshow to explain this component of Gen AI and its potential and debunk some of the misinformation. For you personally, now that you are kind of at the forefront of tackling some of this stuff, how do you balance your day to day and emerging technologies like this? Because obviously, I'm as you've got an ear to the ground, you're responsible for a lot of this leadership piece, but also delivery still has to be focused. And how do you balance those two pieces in your day to day?
Great question. I'm sure everyone has their own approach. I would say the majority of my day is spent, again, communicating, speaking with stakeholders, understanding their challenges with an eye to the future. I certainly don't keep up with new technology as much as I would like to. I don't know how anyone could with how fast things are moving today. I will say that at Lincoln, our data science team, we work really, really closely with another data science team on the distribution side of the house. And that leader is more technical than I am and more embedded, I would say, in the project work. And so that partnership really allows me to focus more on what I would consider some of the longer term vision, benefits, et cetera, helping to drive the conversation, influence the conversation on where we're going. And then also have a great project management support as well that admittedly does take some of that off my plate. So I'm not sure if that's balancing as much as saying, hey, there's other folks on the team focusing on that. Certainly, all are important and need to make progress on the day to day, while also, again, knowing what that North Star is, and hopefully something that I really try and do with folks on the team is make sure that they understand the motivation behind how their day to day supports that long term vision. And I think that really goes a long way in motivating employees and ensuring that we're on the right path.
Actually, I like that a lot because we've been talking about data culture, and just listening to you, I can hear even within your team, you guys have developed your own data culture and partnership, and you're partnering with this other person on the other team to help balance and share some of that responsibility, so that both teams are going to be raise up their levels and help the business execute even better. So that's quite interesting. I quite like that. Chris, I wanted to say thank you for being on. I know you got to get back and tackle all the stuff that we're talking about. If somebody wants to reach out to you, touch base on anything you've mentioned, what is a good way to connect with you?
Absolutely. Please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and include a small note, if you will, in terms of referencing this podcast or something else, and I'll be sure to respond. Would love to connect.
Awesome, man. I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. That's it for the episode. Be back again. Different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I think the conversation around data culture is happening more and more. And I think a lot of the things that Chris mentioned were just beginning. Even though data's been around a long time, I think now, as Chris mentioned, we're shining that spotlight on data, and that's kind of nice. I think everyone in the data field's kind of appreciating that, and the recognition's got to be great. Now, got to get the business done and hopefully help in every way we can. And Chris touched on a lot of different things. So we actually went pretty broad. He covered a lot of different areas in terms of stakeholder, in terms of foundational pieces, in terms of data layer and data culture. So if you guys like to get a little bit deeper, reach out to him. He will leave his LinkedIn URL in the show notes. We didn't get as deep. Maybe we'll have him back to tackle a particular piece a little bit more in depth later. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the podcast is going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.